do the next one. All right, so now this is the walk cycle. So I want to just show how the walk cycle gets put together. The whole purpose of the poses, the walk cycle, is getting to the animation part. So the stuff here carries right over from the poses. If you know how to move the character around, you know how to pose the character. All these are just different poses, one right after another to get this movement, okay? So this is stage 1 of this, which is just getting the legs to slide like that, okay? Now after, why do you do that, Maya? I want to go to there. Scenes, there we go. This is walk cycle 1. So the first pose is just getting the feet to shuffle. I'll show these obviously in more detail in a second. And then we'll be getting the feet to lift. Do not try to get them to do everything at once. Do not start just like the bouncing ball, or some people try to start at the bouncing ball. I'm going to do this frame, then I'm going to do this frame, then I'm going to do this frame, and then that frame, and then this. Do it in a specific way that makes sense to how this guy is set up. So every time you do an animation, you start off with your ready to go one, which has all your characters set up, has all your materials set up. I think I even have like a little scene environment in my area. There he is. He's all ready to go. And the way that we're going to do this is the end game of this one is we want to have a loopable animation. Okay, so if you got to the part in the Chickster where we created that cycle of the character walking, that's what we want to do. With this one, though, we're actually going to make it loop so that we can have it loop a billion times if we want to. We want to be able to control the speed if we desire, okay? It also helps, obviously, to have some sort of reference. So if you didn't close your downloads folder, you could see there is some reference here. So here's some reference. You could download that as well. I also like to use walk cycle poses or frames. This is a very good one. This is by Idle Worm, and basically it gives you all the poses. Now the idea is looking at the first pose and the last pose, those two poses should be the same. Looking at the middle pose, that should be the complete opposite of that, okay? That's your cycle. So that's how we animate this, is that we start off creating this pose, then doing that pose, and then coming here and doing this pose. Then we kind of break it into the middle of those two areas, then we break it in the middle of those areas, and that gives us our walk cycle. Okay? For beginners, this is like the best way to do that. So I'm going to start getting him into his first pose. His first pose has one leg back, and it has his hips down. Now remember that I have two hip controllers. I have this one here. That's not the one I want to push down. That's the one I want to push down. I have one leg forward. If you look at this leg looks like it's pretty straight. It's not completely straight, but it's pretty straight, okay? Never ever straighten the leg out completely like that, because what'll happen is you'll get this popping that it's really obvious in the animation. His leg is bent, and then it just like pops straight, and then it bends again. It pops straight and bends again. So you want to keep some sort of bend in that leg. For this one here, this is going to be, let's say, there. Looking at where the hips are, if you look at the character like this, where do you think the character's weight is at right now? It seems like it's in the back foot, maybe even a little bit like halfway between them, okay? When you walk, what happens is you're actually like falling forward, and your body is just catching itself every time, right? So as you walk, your weight should be distributed forward so that your body moves forward. So his hip should actually be maybe a little bit more forward than the back leg is. Okay, now we're not there yet, but we will get there. Okay, so just stuff to keep in mind. When we walk, if our right foot is forward, our right hip is turned forward. So we also want to include that in there too. So I want to take his right hip and I want to twist it like that. Now I also have on this one, I have different controls than you have if you don't use this rig. He has these. I am not going to use those for anything. This is like, I don't know what that's for. I can just hide those. I can't hide them. I'll just leave them there. But I do want to twist that hip forward, okay? Looking at the character here, he also has kind of this arc in his back. Now, our initial animation in this is going to be just lower body. That's all we're focusing on. We're ignoring everything upper body. The only thing we want to look at is how the hips are positioned. So if he's walking forward, chances are his hips might be like that and kind of like that. Okay? If we look at this here, that's not a good one. There you go. If you look at this one, you can see how the hips are bent sideways and this way depending on which leg it is. So it's not just that your hips are turning front to back, but they're also like twisting that way and this way, okay? So we have to keep that in mind too. So I'm going to raise that one up a little bit. Ignore the fact that he's like tilted off to the side. That doesn't matter. Okay. If we look at that picture again, one foot is on his heel, the other foot is on his toes. Every rig is going to be different. This rig and the Andy rig both have the foot roll, which allow me to go on the ball of the foot, and then if I go the opposite direction, allows me to go on the heel of the foot, the heel of the foot. And that makes it a lot easier to put it into the correct direction, okay? So this one's going to be on the heel of the foot. Now I can push it forward a little bit more. Again, not popping the leg there, it's too much, right about there. Going to this one, going to foot roll, putting that here, and putting that back. Okay, that's like a really wide step. It's like going crazy here. I'm going to just push this up a little bit more. There you go. So now he feels like his weight is probably going forward. He's on the ball of his foot there. That's there. Good. I want to make sure I haven't lifted it off the ground very easily. I could do that just a little bit, and it is annoying to fix. Okay, so now I need to set keyframes. So this is where the character sets come in. All those things that I just moved should be locked inside my lower body character set. That's why we created it. So if I switch this to lower body, and then I hit S, I see it says 36 results. That means that all the stuff that I just moved has 36 keyframes set on it. So if I click here, all of those should have keyframes. All of these should have keyframes. And then the hips here should have keyframes too. And they do. They all have keyframes. So now I'm going to go to 60. This is way too long. There we go. I'll go to 60. And then I'll hit S again. Oops. There we go. So now I have my start and I have my end. Now I'm going to go in the middle and I'm just going to switch everything so that it's the opposite foot. So I'm going to go to this foot here. You can be OCD about this and write down all of these numbers and then transpose them to the other one if you want to do that. I don't do that. I just say, I kind of eyeball it. So what I do is I take my viewport and I line up where these things are. It's pretty good. And then I just move this one here and then rotate that back. And then I grab the other one, which I can barely see. And then I go there. Some people will want to write down both numbers and then put them in there. That's totally up to you. All right, so now we see that this back leg is stretched out crazy. This front leg is bent. I have to go back to the hips, and now I rotate the hips the other direction. So they go this way, and they go that way. And then I set a key again. So now if we watch this, this is what we have. Ignore again the arms. Don't pay attention to the arms. Okay. Now you can see his leg popping. Okay, right there. That's something we don't want. So if I go back to 30, that foot is either way too far back, or that foot roll is not enough, or the hip rotation backwards is not enough. Okay, that's not going to help anyway there. Nope, I'm just going to move this foot just a bit forward like that. So what I'm doing each time is I'm making sure that the front pose and the middle pose and the end pose look good. I do not move on until these three poses look good. Until I have something that I'm saying, cool, this is working. It looks like it's a nice fluid motion from one to the other. If for some reason, let's say I did something wrong. I forgot to move that back. Okay, that is something wrong. That didn't work right. So I need to fix that. So I would pull it back, and then I would set my keyframe again. There we go. Gorgeous. Okay. All right, so that's working good. So now what I'm going to do is my first one was at 1, and then I was at 60. I cut that in half and went to 30. Now I'm going to cut 30 in half and get to what number? 15. Thank you. So at 15, if I look here, this is 1, this is 30, this is 60. 15 should be this passing pose, okay? So the passing pose has the supporting leg pretty straight. The passing leg is bent. And then the character, if you look at him, his weight is a bit forward of his feet, or it's going forward. As you move your leg, if you pay attention to this, you're actually moving your thigh and your hip, and that swings your calf out to make a step. So when you walk, you're actually like flinging your calf and your foot out to make a step. So some people will try to put their foot like forward like this, like you're making a huge step. It's not. It's more of like your calf is coming out and your foot kind of like flings it. So your thigh should always go first. All right. So I need to know which foot is moving forward. So which foot is moving forward? That one. Yep. So if I watch it, it's going like that. Okay. So I'm going to then take this one. I'm going to raise it up to about there. I'm going to take his hips. At this point, his hips should be pretty square-ish, not perfect. I can still bend him forward a little bit. I want to remove anything here that may be causing his foot to be bent like this. The only reason his feet are bent like that is because his foot is on the ground and it's doing that. The second his foot is off the ground, it shouldn't be doing that. That doesn't make sense. So put that back to 0, like that. If you look at it here, it is kind of like angled. So I can use my rotate and rotate that back. And then I can grab his hips and pull that up a bit. Now this is not the highest. Also look at the head height. This head height and that head height are pretty similar. High point is the highest one, so his head is actually a little bit higher. I'm going to leave it about there. He's a taller guy, so I have to kind of adjust for that. I'm going to pull this back just a little bit. Okay. All right, so I'm going to set a key. I'm going to put this on a layer so I don't keep selecting it. All right, so now if I watch it, he goes... And what you should get here is you should get a pretty good, I mean right away it looks like a pretty decent walk cycle of just that, like just his foot kind of coming up and doing that. With his arms not moving, it looks like he's lurching, but whatever. All right, so now 15 looks like it's pretty good. Oops, I do have to go to 15 and also set the other foot to 0 too, so its foot is flat. All right, so I'm going to go to 45 and do the same thing. So now on this foot, which is the opposite side, I'm going to raise it up. I'm going to make sure this is 0. I'm going to make sure this is rotated some. I'm going to make sure this foot is at 0. Make sure this is lifted up. Reset all my rotates. Give him a little bit of forward movement there. And that should be good enough. We'll set a key. Okay. There we go. So already we have a pretty decent walk cycle. There we look at that. Okay. Now for some things that actually may be good enough. So I want to actually add in this recoil here. And what the recoil does is if you look at it as he's coming in to take this step, this foot is basically, the hips are coming down. He's kind of planting his foot a little bit and lowering down. And then he's stepping up. That's what's happening at the next one. Okay, so I'm going to go cut this in half. You can't cut 15 directly in half inside here, so you just kind of pick 7 or 8. Whichever one, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to lower the hip some. If you look at recoil, he has this foot flat on the ground. So this front foot should be flat on the ground. This foot here, again, should not have the toes bent. So we'll put that at 0. We will rotate it forward. I'll also move it forward. This should also probably be a little bit more forward maybe. And we'll set a key. Okay, I shouldn't need to tweak the hips too much because of they're already kind of doing what they need to do. They're rotating one direction, then the other direction, then the other direction. If I would have started at frame 1, then went to 7, then went to 15, then went to 22.5 or 22, then went to 30, I would have to rotate the hips each time to do that. Okay, so I'm just looking right now at that first one. All right, that looks pretty good. And what we're looking at here is there looks like a little bit of a delay as he's bringing this foot up. It looks like that foot is actually like dragging behind and then being flung out. That's what we want, right? So now I'm going to do the same thing here. So this one, the front foot should be flat. This foot should also be flat, but then we'll rotate it and then we'll lift it up. And then this we can probably scoot down a little bit and scoot forward a little bit. Okay. So again, we have that same thing. The foot looks like it's kind of dragging behind and being flung out from the thigh as opposed to just like moving with it. Going back to our stick animation, that's what we had. We have a little bit of delay, a little bit of stagger in our animation. So now I'm going to go to 22. I stopped it right on it. And I'm going to do high point. High point has his feet on the ball of his foot. His leg is almost straight, and then this leg is bent. Okay. So we're pretty close there. I'm going to straighten this up a little bit more. I'm going to pull this up. Now you also have to keep in mind your character. If I have a taller character, this is going to really accentuate it. If the character is smaller, it's going to work perfectly for someone like this. So I can't exaggerate it as much as they're exaggerating it. All right, so I'm going to take this one. I'm going to reset that to 0. I'm going to pull this up. So let's see what that looks like. There we go. That's all right. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this one. We'll reset that to 0. I'll move it up. A little bit of rotation here. So you can see how the poses is really going to come into play because the quicker you can get into these poses, the quicker you can move through all of this. Let's ignore that again. Just look at the legs. All right, so we could smooth out some areas, but I think overall that's pretty decent. Sweet. Okay, so let's call the legs done. Again, we could tweak them. We could play for another hour just adjusting things, but for right now it's good. I'm going to switch to upper body. Now on upper body, if we look at what the arms do here, the arms are basically at one pose and then another pose. That's all they're doing the entire time. If the character was doing something special like cracking his knuckles or whatever, that wouldn't be in a walk cycle. We're doing a cycle, so he's just going to be doing this kind of movement. So I need to set that up. Now his current setup is using IK. This is extremely difficult to do a nice little arced movement because as I'm moving this, you can see all the translates that are moving. Okay, so I basically have to get all of those lined up perfectly in order for this to work. So I'm going to switch. On Mr. Manhattan, I have this little light bulb. I'm going to switch my arms to FK. There we go. And FK means that I get these things that I could just grab this and rotate it and create that same rotation movement very, very quickly. All right. Now, as I click this, you'll notice that none of these are highlighted in yellow. When I grabbed the foot, these have the yellow highlight. That yellow means that they're part of the character set. These were never added to my character set. So every time I hit S, it would not set keyframes for these. So I need to make sure that they're part of that. So I'm going to grab all 3 of these on both sides. Make sure I'm on upper body. Yes. And then make sure I'm under animation and make sure I go to add to character set. Oops. I did not add all 3. There we go. These are already there. That's already there. Good. This is there. His belt buckle is not there, so I'll add that in there. Good. Okay. So I'm going to start off on frame 1, and I'm going to position it. Now, whatever the lower body hips do, the shoulders counteract that. So if your hips move to the right, okay, so if your right leg is forward, your shoulder is going to have the left shoulder forward, okay? That way we stay balanced. If we didn't, it would look weird. He would walk like that. So I'm going to twist his shoulders. So if I grab this and I reset him a bit. So I'm going to start by the waist and then move my way up. There we go. Rotate that a bit. Grab this one, rotate that a bit. We can always tweak how much we move it later. We just want to get it kind of in the ballpark. So you can see his belly button is going way off to the side. That's like a lot of movement for him, okay? That's like crazy. His belly button should actually be more like that probably, okay? That's why I have this one on here, so I can tweak that as I'm adjusting the other one. All right, so I'm going to take this. His shoulders look like they are definitely rotated more towards the front. He's still facing forward, which is obviously an important thing. I don't want him facing off to the side. He's going forward. I need him to face forward. This arm here, because we swing with opposite legs and arms. So this arm, I'm going to roll this a bit forward like that. And roll that a bit forward like this. I can put his fingers in a relaxed pose too, just by grabbing these and, you know, adjusting them. You know, maybe he's angry, so he's going to be in a fist. There we go. Perfect. Cool. All right, that's good. And then the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to rotate this a bit back. There we go. So this is going to be a bit of a sassy walk probably, but we'll see. So we'll set a key here. We'll go up to 60, set a key. I'm going to go to 30. Holy cow. Well, this is going to be a weird one. All right, so we'll go to 30 and we'll swap everything so it's the opposite. So we'll rotate the hips this way. Oops, not too much. That's good, good. And then we'll grab the next one and we'll straighten them up like this. I'll rotate that. Now your character has different stuff if you do not choose the same one as me. So you want to make sure that you know how to move the character around so that he can do this kind of stuff. There we go. Okay, this shoulder is now going to go back because that's the back leg. This will go a little bit down. This will go a little bit back like this. This one will then come up. Good enough. We'll set a key. Oops. All right, so now if we watch it, there we go. And with 3 keyframes, the arms are pretty much done. We can go in there and tweak them. We can add some more in there, but that's pretty much it, just like the feet. We could go again to like the midpoints and kind of tweak what the arms are doing, but for what the arms really do, not a huge need in this case. Okay, so a couple things I'm looking at. I'm looking at the hips. I want to make sure that they look smooth, they look symmetrical. If they rotate to one side so far, I want to make sure they rotate to the other side so far. Okay, now it's hard to see that here. Obviously there the hips are going crazy, like right there, that's a lot. So let me twist that back a bit. And now because I twisted that a bit, you can see how the leg is now straightened out. So I may need to jump back to the leg. And maybe just scoot that forward some. There we go. And then just make sure everything else is still working. Okay. Good. All right, good enough for what we're doing. Now my character, his setup is pretty decent where his head is always looking forward. Some are not. I believe the Andy one does not. When he rotates the shoulders, the Andy looks this way and then Andy looks that way. If my character did do that, I would switch to the head. And then I would also rotate the head so that it moves with the character so that they're still looking forward. So I would again go to frame 1. Make sure, let's pretend that this is forward. Make sure he's looking forward. Go to frame 60, make sure he's looking forward. Then go to frame 30, and then make sure he's looking forward. But now, obviously, he's going to look off to the side because that's what I just set him to do. There we go. Sweet. Okay, so that's the walk cycle. Now, we can clean some of this stuff up. Here's another cool thing about having the character set. If we go to upper body and we go to the graph editor, here's every key for the upper body. Now, initially, it's going to be insane to even attempt to look at anything. Most of these are not even being used because they're like each finger curl. I didn't animate the finger curl. Just ignore it. Just go through each one of these, and then you'll see. Now, there's nothing really to adjust on the hand itself or on the arms themselves. You can see their graphs are pretty simple. They start here, they go there, they do whatever. Okay. When we get to the feet, let me switch to the lower body. Foot roll, there it is. Okay. When we get to the foot roll, this is what his foot roll is doing. So what I'm looking for in any of these graphs are oddities. So if something like odd happens in the middle of it, like just for fun, that does that. There would be no reason for the foot roll to like start to bend the foot, come back, and then start bending again. That wouldn't make sense for a walk cycle. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. What we should see is a cycle. So it goes here, it comes down, and then it goes back. That's what's happening there. Okay, it's starting off at 15, going down to -7 or so, and then coming back up to 15. If I find this is left foot, if I find right foot's foot roll, you'll see that it's pretty much the opposite of the other one. So here's one, there's the other. Now this one you'll see does have an extra keyframe up here. That's kind of weird. This should probably be at 0. I can check it by going to that frame and then maybe resetting this to 0. Nope, it was the other way around. See that? Oh no, that's right, yep. Because this keyframe is actually the same one as that keyframe. So that's right. Okay, cool. Leg twist didn't do anything. If I needed to, if we look at this, I need to fix this anyway. Look at his knees here. They're basically pointed straight and actually kind of pointed inward. Your knees don't typically do that. People typically walk with their knees pointed a bit outward, even their feet a bit outward. Okay, not crazy, but a bit. So we'll fix that too. So if I go to my leg twist, and that's one leg twist. Where's my other one? Right there. And I just grab these and start moving them. You'll see that there's only a little bit of movement. My scale on the graph is at 0.6, 0.4, 0.2, so I need to really zoom out. And then I'm in the move tool and I move it. And you'll see how we can then get the knees to point a bit more further out. And it may sound silly, but that's just that thing of just opening the knees a bit more will change how your animation looks like a lot. Like it makes it look a lot more realistic. And then the same thing with the feet here. I want to grab the rotation for them. Should be rotate Y, should be rotate Y up here. There it is. And the same thing, I should be able to just go here and rotate them. I have to do them individually. They have to go opposite directions, apparently. There we go. Now we are getting a little bit of popping, but that's not a big deal because I can fix that too. Okay? So as I get the popping in here, the reason that it's popping is because the legs are turned out more, so the feet are going further out in each direction. So if I take the pelvis and I pull it down a little bit, that will make sure that the knees don't do that. So I go to my pelvis, which is down here. Foot, foot, foot. Pelvis translate Y. There we go. And anywhere that it's popping, right there, if I just take this and I just move it, you'll see that I won't get that popping. There we go. No popping there. And then... the only spot? Yeah, that was the only spot I was really getting any popping. Cool. Okay. The other thing I can do too, like now his knees are really far out. Let's go back to the foot rotate. Let's go back to this foot rotate. Oops, not foot rotate. I want knee rotate. Leg twist and leg twist. So maybe I'll just take these down to like -5 or so. There we go. So that feels a bit more natural. If I need to take his feet and actually move them out more, I can go to the translate X for his feet. And I can move it out just a smidge. And then do the same thing on the other one. Okay, and then again I can adjust the pelvis if he starts popping his knees again. Okay.
There's like a totally straight line with a whole bunch of keyframes. Should we be deleting?
You don't want to delete any of the keyframe, or you don't want to delete all the keyframes. What I would say is you could delete the middle keyframes, okay? Because what happens is after we go to the next step, we can't get stuff back into it. So if we decide I want to adjust something or animate something, we can't do that, okay? So you don't have to. No. It'll save this much probably processing time on your stuff, but for typically an animator who keeps their stuff clean would do that. Now for something like this, you may want to go through and clean these up. This is his foot movement forward, so his foot movement forward should not have any like back and forth movement on it. That's kind of what we're getting here. It should be one nice fluid motion of him coming in. So if I delete those middle ones, that translates Z, and this translates Z. That one's actually a lot smoother. What we may get, or should get, is a bit smoother motion on his feet moving forward. Okay, I'm still getting some popping there, not a big deal. Again, I could go into the graph editor and just grab that pelvis, translate Y, figure out where he's popping. Looks like it's still probably in that same spot-ish. I could even just grab the whole graph and just pull the whole graph. Oops. Down a bit. There we go. And still probably bring those knees in some. Holy cow. Let's go -2. Just go 0. There we go. Okay. So now before I go on to the next step, I'm going to save this character as Mr. Man. Okay, so that says walk ready. Okay.
Can we use the same rig for the WalkCycle?
Yes, you want to use the same one that you used on your poses for the walk cycle and the animation and the pickup. Okay, so once I have this, I want to then take this and loop it as many times as I want. Okay, now I could go into the graph editor and tell it to automatically loop everything, but that's a very inefficient way to do it. Especially if you were going to take this into a video game, that wouldn't do you any good. So I'm going to go to the animation editor's tracks editor, and inside here I'm going to make sure I'm on lower body. I'm going to go to create animation clip, and I'm going to call it lower body. I'm going to set this to animation curve, make sure it says put clip in tracks and visor, create. So now I have lower body as a clip. My timeline is empty. There's no more keyframes in the timeline. I'll do the same thing to upper body. Create animation clip. Okay. You'll notice that upper body didn't load. Is it being stupid? What is it doing? Let me go to auto load. There we go. And I'm going to pick on Manhattan. There we go. Okay. So I made sure that my list was set to auto load, and then I made sure that this was on my main one. If I had a head one too, because my character's head was going back and forth, I would load that one. He doesn't, so I'm not. Now this gives me a clip. So when you play a video game and you hit the forward button, what happens is the character has a cycle of movement that he's doing, which is a walk cycle, okay? When they jump, you hit whatever button, they transition from a walk to a jump, and then they do a jump clip. And when they shoot someone, they grab a gun, whatever it is, they transition to a gun clip and they shoot, and that's a different clip. Every single thing you're seeing in video games is different clips of animations and then blends between all of those clips so that they function correctly. You may not remember this, but years ago when you had like Mario, it would basically like you were running and you couldn't actually jump until it finished a clip. So you'd have to wait until that cycle was over and then it would let you jump. So sometimes there was like a hair of a delay. Now they fixed it so that you don't. So it automatically transitions, figures out where the character's at, and then goes into it. Cool. So I grab these two clips. It gives me start frame, scale, hold, pre-cycle, post-cycle, wait, and whatever. So if I say post-cycle 5, you'll see that these things get yellow bars here. If I make more frames, 500 looks good, and I start playing, you'll see that my character keeps walking. Okay, now he's going to stop at about 300 or so, 360. And the reason he stops at 360 is because my clip is 60 frames long. I've cycled it 5 times after. So 6 times 6 is 360. So that's where it stops. Now here's where it's cool because you can see how fast he's walking. It's actually kind of like a slower pace. If I want him to move faster, I go to scale and I set this to, let's say, 0.25. Now he's going to walk 4 times faster. Now he's going to the store. Yeah. All right. Now here's 0.7. Here's 0.6. So now this animation that we have is now repurposable because we can take this one character and have him do several different things. This is obviously isn't a run cycle. It's a walk cycle. But we can have him walk different methods or different speeds. Now you can inside here, inside Maya, you can create walk cycles, run cycles, climb cycles, whatever it is, and you can transition from one to the other to the other. If you have a character climbing a flight of stairs, you don't have to animate him climbing every single step. You animate him climbing one step and then another step, and then you loop that animation for as many steps as you want. Now on top of that, you can add other animations. So I could actually take whatever his arms are doing here, and I can add an animation on top of that. So if he sees a neighbor, as he's walking, he can wave, and that animation would just be layered basically on top of this cycle, which is pretty sweet. Cool. So what we want to do for our assignment, find a good rate. So let's say 0.6 in this case is a good rate. 0.65 is a good rate. There we go. So that looks pretty decent. I'd still probably want to adjust his hips. He looks like he's maybe a little bit too far back. I maybe want to push him forward some. I'm going to say 5 post cycles. Okay, so you can see how far he's walking. Okay, so I just go until it stops. Right there. Okay, so about let's call it 240. 240 he stops. So my end animation, even though this is a cycle, you're rendering out the entire animation. That way I can verify that he walks in a cycle. You're going to render out the character for the entire 240 frames from a side view and a front view. Okay? So here's how you're going to set that up. You're going to create a ground plane. You can make it ginormous. There we go. And you're going to create another camera. So I add a new camera. Now the trick here is if you look at the horizon, you want that horizon to line up perfectly, because when we put this in After Effects, those two horizon lines need to match up. If they don't, it's going to look stupid. I also need to make sure that I render this at the correct resolution. There's no sense in rendering out all of this when all we need is the character. So you can actually render out half of the width of this because the character is different, more taller. So if I go to 480 for the width by 540, that gives me a good size. So if I put him like this in the front view, I rotate this to the side view, I'm going to try to match up the height of the character and try to make sure that they stay in frame the entire time. So here he's staying in frame. Here he's staying in frame. Perfect. Okay, so now I have my 2 cameras already set up, ready to go. I should actually just make a new camera here. New camera. There we go. Okay, so I have perspective 1, which is my side render. And I have perspective 2, which is my front render. Okay, so all my cameras are set up where they need to be. There's one here, there's one there. I have my dome lighting set up. Mr. Manhattan, everything glows on him, so I need to make sure that all of his controls are on a layer that I can turn off so that they don't glow. If you remember from the previous video, when I rendered stuff out, you would be able to see nothing because I've hidden my background. There it is. Remember everything glowed? I was about to say glued. Everything glued. There we go. So I put all those controls on a layer, and now they don't glow. I could add another light in the scene. It's actually the default lighting. Oops, that's not it. The default lighting works fine here. We have a shadow. We can see him. That works. When you render your stuff out, same settings as before. Make sure you pick the right cameras. So you have your front renderer, your side renderer. If you need an extra camera, you go down to the bottom. 480 by 550. I would name your stuff. If you right click, you can insert the camera name and call it WalkCycle. And name.number.extension. I'm going to, in this case, 240. I can pull my anti-aliasing up a bit. You don't need to do motion blur on this. It would look nice. You don't need to do it. Okay, and then I would go to renderer. That's not it. And I would say render sequence. All rendered enabled cameras. You don't need the script again. Don't use a script. Just use this. And then hit render sequence. Once it's done.
Renderable layers?
Nope. Renderable layers is something different. Just the cameras. Once it's done, you should have 2 sequences. And then when you go to After Effects, if I've set my project correctly, there's one walk cycle. There's another walk cycle. So I'm going to drag this down onto my composition. There he is. That's how fast my computer is. It's done rendering already. I'm going to take my composition setting and just make the width of this back to 960. And put him on one side and then put the other one on the other side. And if you look, I'm just a hair off, like right there. It sucks. So I'm just going to move this up a little bit. It's hard to see, but now I'm off there. So what I can do, whoops, is if I scale this up just a little bit, like 102 maybe. There we go. So 102 was an acceptable value there. So now my line is perfect. It looks like they were rendered in the same scene, just front and back, okay? So making sure that you have those 2 cameras side by side, that line goes as close as you can get it to being straight across. That will make all the difference in the world. And then I'll just render this out.
So what you're going to want to see is the exported QuickTime movement model.
Yep, I want to see this. This is what you're going to be turning in. Now, in Nikki's, you saw she did the 4 views. You could totally do that. There's not much merit in seeing the top view or seeing the back view or the other side. These 2 views are perfect. The perspective view is neat too. For me to see it, to turn it in and grade it, whatever, I need those 2 views. Now, just as extra added fun stuff here, because we have a walk cycle, and this is where we can actually use this for other things, is that I have this Manhattan controller that I can move around wherever. So what I can do is I could actually go here at the beginning and set a keyframe on, Let me just turn this thing off. Set a keyframe on this. Come up to, let's say, 240. And move this forward. I don't know if that's how far it would take for him to walk. We'll find out. Now, this is not for the assignment. This is just for fun. Do not do this for the assignment. Yep, he's definitely gliding. That's way too fast. All right, let's pull it back a little bit. Oops, I need to pull it forward. Sorry, not back. Let's go 500. Come on. There we go. There we go. We're getting closer to that magic number. Somewhere inside here is a magic number where it would look like he is actually walking forward. It will not look perfect because his feet are going to glide a little bit, but it will get us kind of there. Now, what's also cool about this is that under the animation menu, under something, because they keep moving stuff around, darn these kids, playback, key, redirect. There it is. Under key, there is a redirect. And what this does is it creates this little node here. And what I'm going to do is put it right on his foot. So this is his front foot. I'm going to set a rotate key for it. And again, this is not going to look perfect. If we had an animation where we need to slap something together, this is where this would come in handy. I would go up a few frames like so. And then I would rotate this. And what it does is it rotates the entire character around. Very similar to just grabbing this and rotating, but it allows me to move that pivot. That's all it really does. There we go. So now if we watch Captain, or whatever his name is, Mr. Manhattan, he's walking and gliding. And then he steps there. So you can see how it kind of turned it. I was able to pivot right off that foot. Again, not perfect, but it's good enough for just kind of visualizing some stuff.
So that allows it to turn?
Yep, it allows him to redirect his motion. Basically, whatever his animation is doing, it just like turns the entire animation, which is pretty sweet because it's otherwise we would have to spin from the center of this, which definitely wouldn't look nice because now he's spinning from the center of him versus pivoting off of that foot. Okay. Now, another thing where these kinds of things come in handy is if you were to play with any crowd simulation software, these crowd simulation softwares use clips, very much like a video game. So all of this stuff here, these are all CG characters that have been introduced into a scene, and they all have these cycles that have been created in Maya. Some of the cycles are just someone standing there. Some of them are them waving. Some of them are someone just going side to side, right? Like if you don't move your character, he just kind of like sways side to side. That's a cycle. So using these kinds of things, you can pipe that information into something like Golem, which is free. You can download this and play with it. And it allows you to do this kind of stuff. What's neat about any of the crowd simulation things is basically you set up in their example files that will walk you through some basic stuff. Here is your ground plane. So you know, like the Chickster, we had to set up this movement of all of them. Okay, the crowd simulators will actually take like here's a starting point, here's an ending point, and they will play that walk cycle until they get to that point. If there is an obstacle in the way, they move around the obstacle. If you tell them to get there and mull, they will get there and mull. It's like pretty sweet. Here is their stuff. I'm going to just skip to the end. That's all we want to see. So there's their default one. And what's cool too is that you can variate. You can make varieties. So even though they look all the same here, when it renders out, all of them have different clothing on. All of them have can have different poses. Come on, I want to see an animation. There you go. So you can see all the different people and different items that they have there. It's awesome. It supports Mental Ray, Arnold, V-Ray, blah, 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 blah. So if you get an extra hour on the weekend, definitely check that out because it's like so much fun. So all of this is exactly that. It's just like animations looped, and then they just said like go in a circle. That's all they did. And they will avoid each other too. Like if you have certain characters, they'll avoid walking by other characters.
So these clip things, you said they use some video games to do walking animations?
Yeah, anything. So when you have your main character moving around, that's a cycle of that. All of these are just cycles.
If I was had like a main character walking in a video game and then I just had to like turn the direction, would that use that control that you just showed?
The redirect? Yep. They're using their own one, but it's essentially the same thing. That's why if you looked at it like, what was that game? James Bond, like for Super Nintendo, where basically you're like walking into a wall for an hour, and then when you turn, you're just like still walking, but you're turning your body. Yeah, GoldenEye. That's exactly it. Yeah, that was the best thing.